I'm Helene, 29 years old, admiring the diamond engagement ring on my finger as I replay James's proposal at our special spot by the lake. Just as my heart was filling with dreams of our future, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother after 15 years of silence, saying she heard about my engagement and wants to plan my wedding. A new start, she calls it. But all I hear is guilt talking. She wasn't there when I needed her most, walking out without even saying goodbye. If you're watching this, let me know where you're from. In the comments, hit subscribe, and stay for a story about mothers' weddings and finding closure. Growing up, my memories of my mother Amanda were scattered but warm. She was a single mother, working multiple jobs to keep a roof over our heads. I remember her braiding my hair before school, her fingers gentle as she hummed old songs I can still recall if I close my eyes. She'd take me to the park on her rare days off, and we'd feed the ducks with stale bread from the bakery where she worked mornings. Those moments felt like we were just like any other mother and daughter, connected in a way I thought was unbreakable. My father had never been in the picture. According to the few stories my mother shared, he left before I was born, unwilling to accept the responsibilities of parenthood. I had his last name, but nothing else. No photos, no stories of what he was like, no connection to his side of the family, except for my Aunt Sophia, who lived across the country and sent birthday cards without fail. Everything changed on an ordinary Tuesday in April when I was 14. I remember the details with painful clarity. I came home from school backpack heavy with homework, looking forward to telling my mum about acing my math test. The apartment felt different the moment I walked in hollow somehow. I called out, but no answer came. Her bedroom door was open, closet half empty, dresser drawers pulled out with a few forgotten items of clothing spilling over the edges. On the kitchen counter, I found a note written in her familiar looping handwriting. I need to find myself. Take care of yourself. Money in the cookie jar should last until end of month. That was it. No explanation, no forwarding address, no goodbye. Just 23 words that shattered my world. At first, I convinced myself she'd return in a few days, maybe a week. I went through the routines of school and home like a ghost, waiting for the sound of her key in the lock. I called her workplace, but they said she'd quit. Her friends hadn't heard from her either, or at least that's what they claimed. As days turned to weeks, the cookie jar money ran out and reality began to sink in. Child services got involved when the rent went unpaid. They tracked down my Aunt Sophia, my only living relative, who flew in from Seattle to become my guardian. Moving across the country to live with an aunt I barely knew was another shock to my already fragile world. Sophia was kind but different from my mother in every way, organized and steady, where my mother had been spontaneous and unreliable. Now I see those differences as strengths, but then they only highlighted my mother's absence. I checked the mail every day for a letter. I begged Aunt Sophia to let me keep our old phone number active just in case. I searched social media constantly as the years passed. Nothing, not a word. Not on my 15th birthday, my high school graduation, when I got accepted to college, or when I received my psychology degree. Every milestone was marked by her absence, a ghost hovering at the edges of celebrations. The nights were the hardest. I'd lie awake wondering what I'd done wrong, what flaw in me had made my mother choose a life without me. Sophia would assure me it wasn't my fault, that sometimes adults make selfish decisions that have nothing to do with their children. Her words made logical sense, but couldn't touch the deep wound of abandonment. How could anyone, especially a mother, leave their child without a backward glance? As the years passed, the raw pain dulled to a persistent ache. But the damage was done. The abandonment shaped me in ways I didn't fully understand until I was older, casting long shadows over my relationships. I developed a fierce independence, convinced that relying on others would only lead to disappointment. I kept people at arm's length, afraid to trust that anyone would stay. After all, if my own mother could walk away, what would stop anyone else? Sophia did her best to fill the mother-shaped hole in my life. She came to every school event, helped me navigate college applications, celebrated my achievements, and comforted me through disappointments. She was there consistently and reliably, something I had never experienced before. Through her example, I slowly learned what healthy love looked like, even as I struggled to accept it. But there were moments no substitute could fill. When other girls went wedding dress shopping with their mothers, when friends complained about their mums checking in too often when Mother's Day commercials filled the TV each May, the wound would reopen fresh as the day she left. 15 years later, I still sometimes wake from dreams where I'm 14 again, coming home to that half-empty closet and that cold, insufficient note. High school became my refuge from emotional pain. I threw myself into academics with an intensity that concerned Sophia. straight A's, honor roll extracurriculars that kept me busy from dawn until dusk. If I was exhausted, I wouldn't have to think about the empty space at parent-teacher conferences or the fact that I had to forge a signature on permission slips because guardian didn't fit in the space marked mother. Independence became my armor. While other teenagers were begging for later curfews, I was creating budgets and learning to cook meals that would stretch through the week. I refused help even when I needed it, determined to prove I didn't need anyone, especially not the woman who had decided I was dispensable. Self-reliance wasn't just a trait, it was survival. College offered a fresh start. I chose a school on the opposite coast, telling myself it was for the psychology program, but knowing it was also a chance to reinvent myself when no one knew my history. Psychology was an obvious choice, a way to understand the trauma that defined me. Every abnormal psych class felt personal, especially when we studied abandonment and its effects on developing minds. I recognized myself in those clinical descriptions: the hypervigilance, the difficulty with attachment, the fear of rejection that prevents intimacy. Dating in college was a series of short-term relationships that ended whenever someone got too close. I'd find flaws in perfectly nice guys, pick fights when things were going well, sabotage connections before they could develop into something meaningful. It was safer to be the one who left than to risk being left again. My friends stopped asking about my love life, accepting that Helene just wasn't the relationship type. Then James walked into the coffee shop where I was working on my dissertation 3 years ago. He ordered a complicated drink with a smile that reached his eyes, left a generous tip, and came back the next day to do it again. On his third visit, he asked about the psychology books spread across my table instead of asking for my number. We talked for hours about childhood development and resilience studies. When he finally asked me out, I said yes before my defense mechanisms could kick in. From the beginning, James was different. He didn't push when I pulled away, didn't demand explanations when I cancelled plans out of sudden panic. He was patient in a way that made me suspicious at first. What did he want? What was his angle? It took months for me to accept that his kindness didn't come with hidden expectations. 6 months into dating, I finally told him about my mother. We were at his apartment cooking dinner together when he asked about my family in that casual way people do, unaware they're stepping on a landmine. Instead of changing the subject as I usually did, I found myself telling him everything, the words pouring out between chopping vegetables. I expected pity, or worse, that look people get when they're reconsidering their involvement with someone damaged. Instead, he listened, really listened, and when I finished, he simply said, "She missed out on knowing an amazing woman." That night changed something between us. Trusting James with my deepest wound allowed me to start opening up in other ways. Slowly, the walls I had built began to come down. It wasn't always smooth. My instinct to run when things got serious didn't disappear overnight. But for the first time, I wanted to fight those instincts more than I wanted to protect myself. My career path was influenced by my past too. After graduate school, I became a child psychologist, specializing in trauma and abandonment. Every day I worked with children going through situations similar to what I had experienced. I could see their behaviors for what they were, protection mechanisms against unbearable pain. In helping them heal, I continued my own healing journey. Throughout these years of growth, I was also building what therapists call a chosen family. Friends who showed up consistently, who understood my boundaries and history, who became the reliable support system I never had growing up. Sarah, my roommate from freshman year, who stayed up all night when abandonment nightmares hit. Marcus and David, the couple next door, who included me in every holiday celebration. Jade, my colleague, who could tell from a single text when I was spiraling and would show up with ice cream without being asked. These were the people who taught me that family isn't just about blood. Therapy was a constant companion on this journey. Weekly sessions where I unpacked the legacy of abandonment, recognized patterns, and learned to challenge the core belief that I was unworthy of lasting love. My therapist Diana helped me see that my mother's leaving wasn't a reflection of my value, but of her own limitations. Some people aren't capable of being what their children need, she would say. That's about their brokenness, not yours. Through it all, Sophia remained my rock. She never tried to replace my mother, but created her own role in my life. She moved closer after I finished college, saying Seattle had gotten too rainy for her taste, but I knew it was to be near me. Our Sunday brunches became sacred time. She celebrated my successes in my career, and with James never comparing our relationship to what might have been with my mother. She showed me what unconditional support looked like, day after day, year after year. When James proposed, it was with full awareness of my history. He chose a private moment by the lake, where we had our third date, got down on one knee with a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. "I know promises are hard for you to believe," he said, "but I'm asking for the chance to keep this one for the rest of our lives." Through tears, I said yes, knowing that while fear might never completely disappear, this was a leap worth taking. Planning a wedding stirred up complicated emotions. Bridal magazines were filled with mother-daughter moments shopping for dresses together, mothers helping with veils, mother-daughter dances. Each reminder was a small stab of grief for what I wouldn't have. I asked Sophia if she would take on some of these traditional mother roles, and her eyes filled with tears as she hugged me tight, saying she would be honoured. I was happy, genuinely happy, despite these moments of sadness. I had created a good life, surrounded myself with love, found a partner who understood me completely. I was proving that abandonment didn't have to define my entire story. And then, just as everything was falling perfectly into place, my phone buzzed with a text from the woman who had walked out of my life 15 years ago. The text came on a Sunday morning. "Helene, it's Mum. I heard about your engagement. We should talk. I've missed so much of your life." My hands shook so badly I dropped my phone screen, cracking against the hardwood floor of our apartment. James, making pancakes in the kitchen, came running at the sound concern written across his face as I stood frozen, staring at the device like it might explode. "Babe, what is it?" He picked up the phone, read the message, and his expression changed from confusion to protective anger. "How did she even get your number?" I couldn't answer. My heart was racing, blood rushing in my ears as 15 years of absence condensed into that single moment. I felt 14 again, standing in an empty apartment, reading that insufficient note. James guided me to the couch, his arms solid around my shoulders as I struggled to breathe. When I could finally speak, I read the rest of the message. "I want to make things right. Let me help plan your wedding. It could be a new start for us. A new start." As if a decade and a half could be erased with flower arrangements and cake tastings. As if all those birthdays and Christmases alone could be compensated for with a perfectly organised reception. James was patient as I cycled through shock, anger, and a confusing spark of hope I hated myself for feeling. "You don't owe her anything, Dicta," he reminded me. Not a response, not forgiveness, nothing. He was right, but I couldn't help wondering how she knew about the engagement. We had only announced it to close friends and family 2 weeks earlier. The investigation didn't take long. My cousin Taylor, Sophia's daughter, had posted congratulations on social media, tagging me in a photo with the ring. According to Taylor, she'd received a friend request from my mother 6 months earlier, and accepted out of curiosity, never thinking it would lead to this. I couldn't blame her, but the idea that my mother had been watching from the digital shadows for months made me feel violated. 3 days later, after countless conversations with James, Sophia, and an emergency session with Diana, I called the number. Each ring sent a jolt of anxiety through my chest. When she answered, her voice was both familiar and foreign, like a song I once knew but couldn't quite remember the tune of. "Helene, is that you, honey? Honey," as if she had the right to terms of endearment. The conversation was awkward, stilted. She explained she was living in Colorado, now remarried to a man named Robert. She had no other children. "I wasn't ready to be a mother then," she said, as if motherhood was something you could put on pause and resume when convenient. "I was dealing with depression, feeling trapped. I met Robert, and he helped me see I needed to find myself before I could be good for anyone else." There was no real acknowledgement of what her finding herself had cost me. No recognition of nights spent wondering if she was dead, years questioning my worthiness, the therapy bills and relationship struggles. Just vague references to difficult choices and how things were complicated. Then came the ask, "Let me plan your wedding as a gift. A new start for us. I know a wonderful florist here in Denver, and I've always had an eye for these things. We could go dress shopping. I could help with the guest list." As if her absence had been a minor disagreement rather than a life-altering abandonment. I ended the call, promising to think about it, then sat in my car in the parking lot of my office for an hour, unable to move. The rage I felt was physical, a burning in my chest that made it hard to breathe. But beneath it was something more complicated, a childish hope that maybe, just maybe, this was a chance for the mother I had needed all those years ago to finally show up. James was supportive but wary. "I'll back whatever you decide," he said that night as we lay in bed, my head on his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. "But protect yourself. Don't expect her to be someone she's never shown herself to be." My therapist Diana was more direct. "Consider what you're looking for from this reunion," she said in our next session. Closure recognition of harm. A mother figure for your wedding. Be honest with yourself about whether she's capable of providing any of those things. She helped me establish boundaries and expectations before agreeing to any in-person meeting. Aunt Sophia's reaction surprised me. I expected anger on my behalf, but instead, she was thoughtful. People can change, she said during our weekly brunch. But change doesn't erase consequences. If you want to see her do it for yourself, not because you owe her a chance. She squeezed my hand across the table. And remember, no matter what happens with her, you have family who never left. Hey, my son. After 2 weeks of deliberation, I texted my mother agreeing to meet in person, but making no promises about the wedding. We would meet at a coffee shop halfway between Denver and my home in Boulder neutral territory, where I could leave easily if needed. James offered to come along, but this was something I needed to do alone. In the days leading up to our meeting, I vacillated between anxiety and a strange detached calm. I had survived her absence. I could survive her presence. I chose a busy coffee shop for our reunion, wanting the buffer of other people around us. I arrived 20 minutes early, claimed a corner table, and ordered a latte I knew I wouldn't drink. My therapist had suggested bringing a grounding object, so I kept my fingers wrapped around the smooth worry stone James had given me, rubbing my thumb over its surface, whenever anxiety threatened to overwhelm me. When she walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. The mother in my memories had worn waitress uniforms and discount store clothes, her hair always pulled back in a practical ponytail. This woman was polished, wearing an expensive-looking blazer, her hair highlighted and styled jewelry catching the light. 15 years had etched fine lines around her eyes and mouth, but she looked younger than I expected, preserved by whatever comfortable life she had built without me. She spotted me immediately, a flash of emotion crossing her face too quickly for me to interpret. For an awful moment, we just stared at each other across the cafe, neither knowing the protocol for this moment. Do you hug the mother who abandoned you? Shake hands. She solved the dilemma by approaching with a tentative smile and sitting down across from me without attempting physical contact. You look beautiful, she said, her voice breathy with what seemed like nervousness. So grown up, I would have recognized you anywhere. The irony wasn't lost on me. I wouldn't have recognized her, but then she'd had the advantage of apparently monitoring my social media. I didn't return the compliment, just nodded and watched her settle into her chair, placing a large tote bag beside her. I brought some wedding magazines. She continued, filling the silence I left hanging between us. She pulled out a stack of glossy publications, dog-eared to mark pages. There's a gorgeous venue near Denver that would be perfect. Very you. Very me. What did she know about what was very me? The presumption ignited a spark of anger. How would you know what's perfect for me? The words came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't regret them. She faltered, then recovered with a tight smile. Well, I've been keeping tabs when I could, and mothers just know these things. Mothers who are present might, I countered. You gave up the right to mother's intuition when you walked out. An uncomfortable silence fell. She took a sip of her drink, leaving a perfect lipstick mark on the cup. I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but I'm here now trying to make amends. By planning a wedding that's your solution for 15 years of absence, she sighed, pushing the magazines aside. I don't expect you to understand what I was going through back then. I was suffocating Helene. 25 years old with a teenager working 3 jobs, no support. When I met Robert, he showed me there could be more to life. Robert. The name tasted bitter on my tongue. The reason was a man. Her eyes flashed defensively. It wasn't just about him. I was depressed, lost. And yes, he was married when we met, and he wasn't interested in having a teenage stepdaughter. He gave me an ultimatum, and I made a choice I've regretted. But we've been married for 14 years now. He's changed. The revelation hit like a physical blow. She had abandoned me for a married man who didn't want the inconvenience of a child. Every justification I had imagined for her, leaving every scenario where she had no choice, collapsed under the weight of this selfish truth. So you chose your married boyfriend over your daughter. My voice was eerily calm, belying the storm inside me. She had the grace to look ashamed, but quickly pivoted. I'm not proud of it. But look at you now, successful, engaged, beautiful. You turned out wonderfully. So maybe it all worked out for the best. The coffee shop seemed to recede as rage consumed my field of vision. Worked out for the best, I repeated, my voice rising. Do you have any idea what it was like? Do you know I checked the mailbox every day for years, that I kept our old phone number active until I went to college, just in case you called, that I have abandonment nightmares to this day? People at nearby tables were beginning to stare, but I couldn't stop the flood now that the dam had broken. I spent my childhood wondering what was so wrong with me that my own mother could walk away without a backward glance. I spent my adolescence unable to form attachments because I was terrified everyone would leave. I'm in therapy to this day, working through the damage you caused. My mother's face had gone pale, her perfectly manicured hands clutching her coffee cup. Helene, please, people are looking. Let them look. Maybe they'll learn something about what happens when you abandon your child. Tears were streaming down my face now, years of unshed grief finding release. You don't get to waltz back in when it's convenient and claim some mother of the bride role. You don't get to pretend the past didn't happen because it makes you uncomfortable. She reached for my hand, but I yanked it away. I'm sorry you see it that way. I thought we could have a fresh start. I've changed, Helene. A fresh start? I echoed hollowly. That's what your note said you were looking for 15 years ago. Looks like you found it without me. I don't need you to plan my wedding. I don't need you to be my mother now. I've done just fine without you. I stood up so abruptly my chair screeched against the floor. Grabbing my purse, I left her sitting there with her wedding magazines and excuses, the curious stares of strangers following me out the door. In my car, the sobs came in waves, grief and rage, and something else, something that felt strangely like relief. For the first time, I had said the words I'd been holding inside for 15 years. Whatever happened next, I had finally been heard. I called James from the car, hands shaking so badly I could barely press the screen. When he answered, I couldn't speak through the sobs. Helene, are you okay? Where are you? His voice was tight with worry. Stay there. I'm coming to get you. By the time he arrived, I had moved from uncontrollable crying to a strange, hollow calm. He drove us home in silence, one hand on the wheel, the other holding mine. At home, I recounted the conversation in exhausted fragments, while he listened, his jaw tightening at the revelation about the married boyfriend, the ultimatum, her dismissal of the impact her choices had made. I shouldn't have lost it like that, I said, curled against him on our couch. I had all these plans to be calm and mature. You were honest, James countered, stroking my hair. After 15 years of silence, you deserve to be honest. In the days that followed, my phone had buzzed constantly with texts and calls from my mother. Please reconsider. We can start small. At least let me attend the wedding. I read them all but responded to none, unsure what I wanted. Part of me, the wounded 14-year-old still living inside, wanted to block her number and forget she existed. Another part, perhaps the therapist in me, wondered if there was a way to establish a relationship with boundaries that protected my emotional health. I took the dilemma to my next therapy session. Diana listened without judgment as I described the coffee shop confrontation and its aftermath. You set a boundary, she pointed out. For possibly the first time in your relationship with your mother, that's significant progress. But what do I do now? I asked. Part of me still wants a mother at my wedding, but I don't know if she can be the mother I need. Those are two different questions, Diana replied. Can you have a mother at your wedding? Yes, if you choose to include her. Can she be the mother you needed all these years? That's much more complicated and probably not something that can happen in time for your wedding day. Extended family began to weigh in, most taking my mother's side. Second cousin Beth, who I barely knew, called to tell me life is short and I should forgive and forget. Uncle Mark, my mother's brother, who had never once reached out during my abandoned years, suddenly had strong opinions about family unity. Only Sophia stood firmly in my corner, reminding everyone who called her that forgiveness and trust are earned, not owed. The most surprising contact came from Robert, my mother's husband. He called on a Wednesday afternoon while I was between therapy clients. Helene, you don't know me, but I'm married to your mother. I think we should talk. Curiosity won out over resentment, and I agreed to a phone conversation that evening. His perspective was unexpected. Your mother has told her version of events for years, he said, his voice carrying the slight drawl of someone raised in the South. That she left to protect you from an unstable home life, that she tried to keep in contact, but her letters were returned that Sophia poisoned you against her. The lies stunned me into silence. He continued. I believed her until recently, but things aren't adding up. The stories keep changing. After you met her, she came home crying, telling yet another version. I need to know if I've been complicit in something unforgivable. I told him the truth, all of it. The note, the years of silence, the absence of any attempt at contact. He listened without interruption, then sighed heavily. I suspected as much. Your mother is a wonderful woman in many ways, but she rewrites history to protect herself from guilt. I've seen her do this with other relationships, friends, and family she's fallen out with. There's always a justification where she's the victim. His candor was both validating and disturbing. If this was a pattern in her life, what guarantee did I have that any relationship we built now wouldn't end the same way? How could I trust someone who couldn't even acknowledge the reality of her actions? The wedding planning continued against this backdrop of emotional turmoil. Dress fittings, venue visits, menu tastings. James's family was wonderfully supportive. His mother Ellen offering help without trying to take over. Sophia stepped beautifully into the mother role, tearing up when I emerged from the dressing room in the gown we both knew was the one. After weeks of consideration, countless conversations with James, Sophia, and Diana, I finally made a decision about my mother's role in the wedding. I would not give her the planning position she wanted, but I would allow her to attend as a guest with clear boundaries about her behaviour. No speeches, no special recognition. No mother of the bride moments that she hadn't earned. I crafted a careful email laying out these terms, explaining that while I was open to beginning a new relationship, trust would have to be rebuilt slowly. The wedding could be a first step, not an erasing of the past. I emphasized that these boundaries were non-negotiable and that violating them would result in her removal from the event. Her response was everything my therapist had warned me to expect. Guilt trips about depriving her of a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Minimization of the past. Accusations that Sophia had replaced her when the truth was Sophia had simply been there. The final line read, "If I can't participate as your mother, perhaps it's better I don't come at all." It was emotional blackmail, an attempt to force me to choose between having her on her terms or not at all. Years ago, it might have worked. The desperate need for maternal approval might have led me to capitulate. But I was no longer that wounded child. "That's your choice," I replied simply. The invitation stands with the boundaries intact. For 2 weeks, silence. I tried to focus on the joy of planning my wedding with people who had actually been part of my life. James and I chose readings that celebrated chosen family and the decision to love. Sophia and I planned a special moment during the ceremony, acknowledging her role in my life. If my mother's absence left a hole, I was determined to fill it with the genuine love that surrounded me. Then came another text. "I'll be there. I'll respect your wishes." No apology for the manipulation attempt, no acknowledgement of the boundaries, just grudging acceptance. It was less than I had hoped for, but exactly what experience should have taught me to expect. As the wedding approached, I felt a strange mix of anxiety and resolution. Whatever happened with my mother this day would celebrate the family I had built, not the one that had failed me. I was marrying a man who had shown me what unconditional love looked like. I was surrounded by friends who had chosen to stay. I had a future built on trust rather than fear. In many ways, I had already won. Wedding week arrived with the usual flurry of last-minute details. Out-of-town guests began arriving, including James's extended family from Chicago. The rehearsal dinner was scheduled for Friday evening at our favorite restaurant, an intimate gathering of the wedding party and immediate family. Sophia had outdone herself with personalized gifts for the bridesmaids and groomsmen. Her attention to detail, a reminder of the consistent care she had shown throughout my life. I was just finishing my welcome toast when a commotion at the restaurant entrance caught everyone's attention. My mother stood in the doorway, scanning the room until her eyes locked on me. She hadn't been invited to the rehearsal dinner, a boundary clearly communicated in my email. Yet here she was, dressed to the nines, a large gift bag in hand. "Sorry I'm late," she announced, moving toward the table as if she belonged there. Traffic from Denver was terrible. The table fell silent. James's parents exchanged confused glances, while Sophia's expression hardened into a mask of protective anger. James squeezed my hand under the table, a silent reminder that I wasn't alone in this moment. "Amanda?" Sophia stood using my mother's first name with deliberate formality. "We weren't expecting you tonight. This is just for the wedding party." "Well, I'm the mother of the bride," my mother replied with a tight smile. "I think that qualifies me as immediate family." She set her gift bag on the table with a thud. "Besides, I brought something special for Helene." Before I could intervene, she was pulling items from the bag. A worn teddy bear I vaguely remembered from childhood. A baby book with sparse entries that ended abruptly at age 3. A handful of school photos, most of which I recognized as the duplicates, automatically sent to both parents through school photography packages. "I kept these all these years," she said, her voice thick with emotion that seemed performative in its intensity. "I never stopped thinking about you, Helene. Never stopped being your mother." The restaurant had gone uncomfortably quiet, other diners trying not to stare at the unfolding drama. James's best man, Derek, cleared his throat awkwardly. His girlfriend, Julia, suddenly became very interested in her water glass. The moment was stretching into an unbearable tension. I stood, keeping my voice level with effort. We need to talk privately, now. In the restaurant's small coat room, away from curious eyes, I faced my mother. What part of respect my boundaries wasn't clear? I'm trying to connect with you, she protested. To show you I cared. I kept your things, Helene. Doesn't that mean anything? The question struck me with unexpected force. Why would you keep my teddy bear but leave me? Why save school photos but never call to ask how I was doing in those classes? Why hold on to reminders of a child you walked away from? Her composure cracked slightly. It's complicated. I told you about Robert, about the depression. What you haven't told me is that you're sorry, I interrupted. Not once have you said, I'm sorry I abandoned you. I'm sorry I chose a man over my child. I'm sorry for the pain I caused. It's always justifications, never genuine remorse. Tears filled her eyes, but I'd seen enough of my mother's emotional displays to recognize when they were meant to deflect accountability. This is supposed to be a happy time, she said. I don't understand why you're making it so difficult. I'm making it difficult. The absurdity almost made me laugh. I set clear boundaries. You're the one crashing events. You weren't invited to, trying to rewrite history, making this weekend about your feelings instead of my marriage. She stiffened. Fine, I'll leave, but I'll be at the ceremony tomorrow. I have rights as your mother. You have the privileges I choose to extend, I corrected. And right now, that's attendance as a guest, nothing more. If you can't respect that, don't come at all. She left without another word, taking her bag of mementos with her. I returned to the table where James immediately put his arm around me. You okay? I nodded, looking around at the concerned faces of the people who had actually been there for me. I'm sorry about that, everyone. Nothing to apologize for, James's father said firmly. Now I believe we were about to hear from the best man. The dinner resumed, the awkwardness gradually dissipating as toasts and stories flowed. Later that night, as James and I parted ways for our last night before becoming husband and wife, he held me close. Whatever happens tomorrow with your mom, remember this is our day. No one can take that from us. I slept surprisingly well, waking on my wedding day with a sense of clarity. Today was about James and me, about the life we were building together, not the past I had survived. I joined my bridesmaids for hair and makeup, champagne and laughter, filling the hotel suite Sophia had arranged. If my mother's behavior cast a shadow, I refused to let it darken the joy of this day. The ceremony was everything we had planned. Standing before our friends and family, exchanging vows with the man who had taught me to trust again, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't anticipated. I caught sight of my mother in the third row, sitting alone, her expression unreadable. Sophia stood proudly in the front row, exactly where a mother should be, tears streaming unashamedly down her face. At the reception, I dared to hope the drama was behind us. James and I had our first dance. The cake was cut. Toasts were made by the maid of honor and best man, both keeping to the agreed-upon schedule. I began to relax, moving from table to table to thank our guests for sharing our day. Then the DJ announced an unplanned toast. Before I could intervene, my mother was standing, champagne glass in hand, microphone clutched like a lifeline. I'd like to say a few words about my daughter, she began, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet reception hall. James was across the room, caught in conversation with college friends. Sophia half rose from her seat, but I gestured for her to wait. This was my battle to fight. Many of you don't know me, my mother continued. I've been absent from Helene's life for reasons too complex to go into here. But a mother's love never dies. I may have been gone, but not a day passed that I didn't think of my beautiful girl. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Those who knew my history exchanged glances. Those who didn't looked confused by the odd tone of the toast. Seeing her today married to James, I can't help but feel my sacrifice was worth it. She's become such an accomplished woman in spite of everything. Or perhaps because of it. They say absence makes the heart grow fonder. I hope Helene's heart has room to welcome her mother back, now that she's starting her own family. The silence was deafening. James had pushed through the crowd, and now stood at my side, his hand protectively at the small of my back. I could feel the tension radiating from him, matched by my own rising anger. This was exactly what I had asked her not to do, making my wedding day about her narrative. With a clarity born of years of therapy and newfound strength, I stood and walked to where my mother stood. Gently, I took the microphone from her hand. Thank you for those words, I said, my voice steady. I do have something to add. I turned to face our guests, seeing supportive faces looking back at me. Today is about celebrating love that shows up consistently and reliably. James has shown me that love. My Aunt Sophia has shown me that love. My friends have shown me that love. I gestured around the room. Everyone here was chosen because they've been part of our journey, supporting us through good times and challenges. My mother's face had gone rigid, sensing what was coming. Real love isn't just feelings or words, it's actions, choices made day after day to be present. I looked directly at my mother now. I appreciate you coming today, but my wedding isn't the place to rewrite our history. This day is about the future I'm building with James, surrounded by the family we've chosen. I handed the microphone to the DJ, who quickly put on a dance song, breaking the tension. My mother stood frozen for a moment, then gathered her purse and left without another word to anyone. I watched her go, feeling not triumph, but a quiet certainty that I had finally stood firmly in my truth. James pulled me onto the dance floor, spinning me away from the moment and back into the celebration. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered against my ear. For the rest of the night, I danced and laughed and celebrated, truly present, in the joy of being surrounded by people who had proven their love through presence, not mere biology. Our honeymoon in Bali was 2 weeks of sun exploration and much-needed distance from the wedding drama. James and I agreed not to discuss my mother for the duration, focusing instead on building memories in our first days as husband and wife. Snorkeling in crystal waters, hiking to hidden waterfalls, sampling exotic foods and night markets. We immersed ourselves in experiences that had nothing to do with past pain and everything to do with future joy. On the long flight home, however, my thoughts inevitably returned to the wedding confrontation and what would come next. "Do you think she'll try to contact me again?" I asked James as we shared airline headphones to watch a movie. "Probably," he said thoughtfully. "The question is, what do you want if she does?" It was the right question. Throughout my life, my relationship with my mother had been defined by her choices, her actions, her needs. For the first time, I had the power to decide the terms of any future connection. It was both liberating and daunting. Back home, unpacking souvenirs and returning to work routines, I found a letter had arrived during our absence. My mother's handwriting on the envelope triggered an immediate tension headache. I set it aside, unable to face whatever justifications or manipulations it might contain. 3 days it sat on our kitchen counter, James carefully not mentioning it, waiting for me to be ready. When I finally opened it, the contents surprised me. No excuses, no rewriting of history. Instead, a simple acknowledgement: I was wrong to leave you, wrong to stay away, wrong to expect immediate forgiveness when I returned. You deserve better than the mother I was. It wasn't a complete reckoning, but it was more accountability than she had ever shown before. She continued, "I don't expect an immediate relationship, but if you're willing, I'd like to start with occasional emails on your timeline with your boundaries. I'm in therapy now, something I should have done years ago." I discussed the letter with Diana in our next session. "It seems like a step in the right direction," she observed. "But one letter doesn't erase years of behavior. What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking about what I want," I replied slowly. "Not what she wants or what others think I should want, but what's actually healthy for me." What emerged from that reflection was a set of non-negotiable boundaries for any relationship with my mother. No pretending the abandonment didn't happen. No mother-daughter relationship until she demonstrated consistent reliability over time. No access to future children until she proved herself trustworthy with firm boundaries. I wrote these conditions in a clear, unemotional email heading, "Send with a sense of empowerment rather than anxiety." Her response came a week later. "I can't change the past, but I accept your terms for moving forward." It was followed by an attempt to jump straight into wedding talk, asking for photos and details, showing she still didn't fully understand the depth of repair needed. I didn't respond immediately, letting her sit with the silence, as I had so many times before. James watched this cautious dance with protective concern. "You know you don't have to maintain contact if it's harmful," he reminded me one evening. "Your well-being comes first." "I know," I assured him. "But I think I need to try on my terms to see if there's any relationship worth salvaging. If not, at least I'll know I gave it a chance as an adult with eyes wide open." The next 6 months brought sporadic, superficial exchanges. My mother would reach out with chatty emails about her life in Denver, dropping hints about visits that I consistently deflected. Each time she pushed a boundary, I would withdraw contact for weeks, a pattern she slowly began to recognize. It was exhausting, this constant vigilance, but necessary if any healthy connection was to be established. During this time, I also strengthened my relationship with Sophia, now officially my aunt by marriage, but so much more in reality. Our Sunday brunches continued filled with genuine interest in each other's lives. The contrast between these easy, loving interactions and the strained exchanges with my mother was stark. One was family built on consistent care, the other a biological connection struggling to find footing. Therapy continued to be my sanctuary, a place to process the complicated emotions of this tentative reconnection. Diana helped me recognize when I was slipping into old patterns of seeking maternal approval, when I was compromising my boundaries out of guilt, when I needed to step back for self-protection. Reconciliation doesn't mean forgetting, she reminded me often. It means building something new with clear eyes about the past. As our 1-year anniversary approached, James and I discussed whether to invite my mother to the small dinner party Sophia was hosting to celebrate. "What feels right to you?" he asked, always my steadfast support. I considered the question carefully. "I don't think I'm ready," I admitted. "Every interaction still feels like emotional labor. I don't want that energy at our celebration." "Then that's your answer," he said simply. "No guilt needed." When I informed my mother she wouldn't be included in the anniversary gathering, her response was telling. Initial acceptance, followed by passive-aggressive comments about being kept on the outside. It confirmed I had made the right decision. A year of tentative contact had shown some growth on her part, but not enough for me to fully trust her presence in significant moments. On our anniversary evening, surrounded by friends who had weathered life's storms with us, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past year. The wedding that had become a catalyst for confronting my past. The boundaries that had allowed me to reclaim my narrative. The chosen family that had proven love isn't defined by biology, but by presence. I realized I had spent so many years defining myself by my mother's absence, seeing myself primarily as the abandoned daughter. Now I was defining myself by the connections I had built, the boundaries I had established, the love I had both given and received. The hole left by her walking away would always be part of my story, but it no longer dominated the plot. If I have children someday, they will know a different kind of mother, one who stays, one who puts their needs above her own desires, one who understands that love isn't just a feeling, but a daily choice to be present. The generational pattern of abandonment ends with me. To my 14-year-old self, waiting by the window for a mother who wasn't coming home, I wish I could say, it wasn't your fault. Her leaving wasn't a reflection of your worth, but of her limitations. You will build a beautiful life filled with people who choose to stay. You will learn that family isn't just about blood, but about who shows up day after day. You will find love that doesn't walk away when things get difficult. The truth I've learned through this journey is that forgiveness isn't about erasing the past or pretending the harm never happened. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of anger and expectations. I may never have the mother I deserved, but I've created a life filled with the love I always needed. As I look at my reflection today, I no longer see myself through the lens of abandonment. I see a woman who has learned to trust wisely, love deeply, and stand firmly in her own truth. My mother's choices shaped part of my story, but they don't determine my ending. That power belongs to me alone. Have you ever had to rebuild a relationship with someone who hurt you deeply? How did you balance forgiveness with necessary boundaries? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more content about healing and growth through life's challenges. Thank you for being part of this journey with me, and remember that your worth is never determined by someone else's inability to see your value.